Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome again to Procrastinator's Pit Stop. We have another amazing guest for you today, Alex Kuhn. He is one of the world's most sought after business leadership minds, featured in Forbes, Entrepreneur, and BuzzFeed. He has mentored over 1,000 clients globally to build successful, integrity driven businesses. Drawing from his own experience of starting and selling two businesses, his success DNA model empowers leaders to align their talents and rapidly achieve 6 and 7 figure success, while his motivational trainings inspire over 25,000 people weekly. Alex, welcome to the show.
Chris, I'm happy, I guess, day after Thanksgiving, honored to be here. Let's get rolling. I'm excited about this.
Yes, well, we're very happy to have you here as well, and we will be digging into a lot of interesting topics right now. But as is customary in the show, we do have a bit of an icebreaker, and that question for you today is: what cartoon character do you resonate with the most, and why?
I have 2 and 5-year-olds, so I still watch cartoons to this day. But for as long as I can remember, I've always resonated with Underdog. And the reason that I resonate very simply with that is I am a 5'9" wannabe Olympic athlete growing up, and I was always competing against people that were bigger, more talented, had all the genetic gifts. So I always kind of felt like I had to work harder, grind harder, get up earlier, go to the double practices. And while I never made that level in swimming, I think I got as much as I possibly can physically out of my body, what I physically was capable of. And I think that just attitude, and I think anybody that would kind of describe themselves as a gym rat can resonate with this idea that, hey, like I got to do things more than the other person. And whether it's true or not, it's been something that's been very helpful for me as I've kind of gone down this entrepreneurial journey in every other aspects. And funny enough, even before this got on here, I was even talking to my son about the idea you got to work at harder if you want to get ahead in school.
Interesting, and thanks for sharing that. Yeah, it definitely is a mindset that many of us have. I mean, I've had the same mindset, and I'm sure all our listeners can resonate with that as well. I mean, no matter what area they're in, always that mindset of needing to do more, right? It's always interesting to hear that, and where we draw the line at enough. But before we expound on that any further, Alex, how do you define procrastination, and what does it mean to you personally?
Yeah. Procrastination for me, I've heard it all the time, right? It's, my first career was as a swim coach, and it would be my student athletes not getting their papers in on time to now working with, really highly successful people. I think there's this misconception that procrastination is just simply for people that just are way behind or is not as motivated. And I think that's kind of nonsense. I still see it with people that are doing 7 and 8 figures. They're still procrastinating. So for me, at the end of the day, this question of like, how do we overcome, quote unquote, this procrastination is much deeper question. And for me, it really, to simplify it for myself, I kind of find it comes around one of these 3 areas. So the first would be is very simply clarity. Like, do you know where you're going? Do you know what you want to do? Do you even know what the next steps are? Because at any point, if you don't have clarity, you don't have confidence. And I think most of us don't have confidence, tend to not want to move forward. The second piece would be, are we connecting with it? Are we connecting the people that we're working with? Are we connecting with ourselves? Are we actually asking ourselves the right questions? Even though we think we know where we're going, is it where we want to go? Why is it where we want to go? And then last and thirdly, I do think there's a level of conviction. And conviction to me is, do I got what it takes? Not many people simply want to go into something they feel like they're not going to do well. So do you have conviction it's going to be successful? So those are kind of obviously a very simple way of describing it. But for me, procrastination is something that I think we all struggle with at every different points in our life. And the question is how do we actually overcome it and keep moving forward, maybe sometimes in spite of it?
I like that. I like that definition. And you mentioned a lot of good things there. Clarity and just knowing what it is that you are interested in doing or what you want to do, and then kind of knowing the ways in which you can get there. Very very interesting. So I know there's no magic bullet, but for you, what is one of those tips or secret sauce to overcoming procrastination?
Yeah, I'm a trained behavior modification. So when I went to school, it was one of my favorite psychology classes. And really at the core of it was this idea that behavior truly actually will modify our mindset. And so even though we talk about this idea of clarity, sometimes we just can't simply sit there and figure out exactly what clarity is going to come. Like, I don't think we can always just go down I'm looking at the woods here on our long journey and trying to figure out the meaning of life or the question of why. There definitely are times for that. But I think there's just times simply you just actually get working, you just get moving, and you start to see what pops up. For me, as right now, even personally, one of the things I've been procrastinating on a lot, and it's been one of the first times in my life, is actually working out. For pretty much my entire life, I've always been somebody that's found it easy to wake up in the morning, get to the gym, get to my home gym, work out from 5 to 6, get the kids ready for the day. But for the past like couple months, I've been really struggling with it. It's like, well, what kind of workouts do I want to do? Do I want to train for this? Do I just want to do a healthier life? And then what happened is because of all those questions, I wasn't doing it. So simply this past week, one of the things I just simply decided was like, I'm just going to show up. Whatever I want to do, I am just going to show up to the gym. And it's amazing how after 7 days, it got me into the mindset like, oh, I want to start doing this type of program. I want to start doing this type of lifting. I want to start doing some more mobility exercises. So at the end of the day, I think sometimes without the idea of knowing where we're going, we just need to start doing.
You bring up a very good point. I use this example a little too much maybe on this show, but, you know, 5 or 6 thousand years ago, when we were running naked through the forest, afraid and scared for our lives, we didn't really sit down and think about how we were going to do things. We just knew we were hungry and we needed food. So we just went out and just started throwing rocks and picked up sticks and, went fishing and did all these other things. So I think you have something there, just get moving and then just follow what you feel is right.
I think a lot of times it's, especially as we get older, I think we all know this, right? Right now, like I said, I got my kids down there. They probably woke up having no idea what they were going to do today, but they just started doing it. Whether it's, well, let me ask dad and mom if they're going to play. Well, when they say no, great. Well, let me see if I can get on the computer. No. Well, great. Let me see if I can bug my sister. No. It's just a movement. I think it's very simple and common for all of us to think, hey, we've got more experiences. We've got more things on our plate. We got more things in our head. We got more things on our to-do list. And so ultimately this idea that, yeah, we got a lot more that's going on, which I think then allows us to say, are we actually just simply trusting ourselves saying like, what if we just start moving without even knowing what we're doing? I think just understanding that maybe intuitively we need to trust those experiences will help us guide us, even if we don't consciously know exactly what we're doing.
Yeah, I like that. I really do like that. And many coaches and many wise people from, again, we're going back 1,000 years. But what was the exact saying? And probably butchering it, but it was, you know, there's the journey of the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And the woodcutter picks up his axe and swings away or something like that. I'm butchering that one, but there are many like that. So what's your way of reminding yourself to keep moving?
I don't think I'm perfect, Chris. I love to sit here. I think that's just something between you and me, especially in this coaching industry or mentorship or mastermind. I never want to be the guy that says, oh, I got it all figured out. I mean, we try to give answers, try to give advice and from experiences and stuff. But, when somebody comes to me and they're just struggling with clarity or they're struggling with procrastination, they're struggling with just simply not moving forward. Of course, it's very easy for me to simply say, why? Why are you not moving? But I also think sometimes that's what I've changed over the years as the wrong question. Every time I think we ask a question to say why you're not doing something, it means that you are basically validating why you're not doing something. So therefore, basically, you're giving yourself even more reason not to do something or even more reason to procrastinate. So a lot of times when a client comes down to me or if I'm just sitting there, as I mentioned, kind of the first thing I do is there are certain things I just simply have in my day that I think kind of trigger for me to kind of take action. If I'm not knowing what to do, and these are some things I've actually asked my clients to do as well. So one of the first things I actually have said is like, what is that breakfast you're going to have every single day? Whatever it is, that breakfast becomes the trigger for as soon as you are done eating or as soon as you're done drinking it, you literally get going, whatever that looks like. I know even I have some people that simply said, hey, you get out of the bed and you start going to the very first thing without doing anything else. You just start working or you start going to your workout. But I find kind of having that little bit of a trigger. For me, it's a green shake. I drink a green shake every single day for the past 20 years. As soon as that thing is done out of the blender and I'm drinking it, I am moving into my work day. So I think that one piece of having that trigger is really important. I think the other thing that I find is, and maybe this is just the athlete in me, is to not expect it just to be an all day activity. There is this point of whether you use I'm probably butchering this Pomodoro timer or you kind of have something around the 45-minute mark, or you break things down in the mornings and afternoons. I do think you should put some competition. You should put some gamification to it to give you some sense of like, hey, I am working on this to this time, and setting a little bit of a mini goal. Set yourself up saying like, I want to hit 10 outreaches if you're in the marketing sales. Perhaps it's like, hey, I want to go ahead and I want to finish a certain amount of project before I call it a break. But I do think kind of putting an end to the game actually does something where I think procrastination gets in the way. When we think of procrastination, we think of time. How much time am I wasting? But when you start to indicate a result, what do I got to get done? Then you ultimately say, I want to get that done as fast as I can, because more often than not, whether you love your job or whether you love your work or whether you love whatever it is you're doing, you probably want to get to other things in your life. You want to go home and spend time with your loved one. You may want to watch the Steelers football game, being a big Pittsburgh Steelers football fan. Ultimately, there's probably other things you want to do. So you might as well give yourself something you want to get done as fast as you can so you can move on to the next things of things that maybe you just want to do more.
I love that, especially the question part, because one of the things that I've been digging into and speaking with, actually we had someone else on our show about this as well. The words that we say ourselves, and when you start using a word like why, I mean, traditionally why has been a very kind of sharp word, and if we don't know the answer, then we just spin. It's kind of like on a calculator when you say divide by zero, it just goes on forever, right? So just by switching that up and saying, what, not why am I procrastinating, but what about this is, what about this is blocking me, or what part of this is, and just going back as a real example, going back to your exercising one. I mean, I had the same issue. I'm not a gym rat, but I try to go out and exercise in my garage, right? And so over the summer, I used my daughter as an excuse. She was out of school, so we were doing stuff. And then she gets back in school, and I'm okay up until about a week ago. It's like, okay, no, I'm good at getting up. I'm good at doing the exercise. I don't mind that. I've been doing it. So let me break it down. Get up. Yep. Getting out there. Yeah, that's fine. Doing that. Yep. It's colder. So now the garage is going to be cold. And that was my resistance. But I fixed that. And then all of a sudden it went away.
Yeah. And how old's your daughter, if you don't mind me asking?
She's 12.
12 there. So she keeps you on your toes, basically. She keeps you moving.
Yeah, 12 going on 80. When I was a child, like yesterday.
And I'm obviously a little behind, and my oldest is 5, but I do think about that side. I think this whole point of like our kids. I know for me, right? I mean, it's so funny how, even now, we've just been talking about working out, and then my wife and I talk about this too. In fact, we were just talking about this yesterday. We were all, around the dinner table, Thanksgiving. We're saying what we're grateful for, and of course, we're saying we're grateful for our kids. We're grateful for our family. We're grateful for all these types of things. And then right afterwards, we all eat our dinner, and then we're all basically exhausted from the tryptophan and the turkey. And we're all sitting there, and it's like, I am so busy. I don't know how I have time to do anything. But yet, I know my wife and I are getting more done than we ever did when we were dating. Talking to my sister, they were saying all the things they've been getting done, and they have 3 kids. So this kind of idea, I think sometimes too, of just this time piece is one of those things where I almost, for a lack of better words, I think sometimes it's nonsense. There's a lot of things I think we tend to say are going to take a lot more time to do than they really actually do. For so many people that talk about, especially, this time of year, I think we're all seeing the Black Friday deals with get in shape, get an exercise, get this program. It's going to change your life. It's amazing how so much of the actual research you go into it, it's like, listen, 3 minutes, 30 days a week. And oh, by the way, just eat at your calorie maintenance will make you healthier, that may basically take care of 95% of the health issues that you actually have. So I think there's this part that sometimes we actually give procrastination more power because we think it's going to take more time. I see it for a lot of my clients thinking about how I'm going to start this business. Like it's going to take so many years for it to kind of come to fruition. I think we see it for health. I think we see it in a lot of things. So I think one thing that happens is that if we get procrastination, we think so much about the future of what we can't control, as opposed to just, well, what can we just do right now and stay in that now as much as we possibly can. And I think that's what kids do great. They're this literally here. They're right here, right in this moment. And so it's almost impossible not to be like, okay, what do you want for lunch? What do you want to do here? Crap, I got to get this email out. So it kind of helps you, I think, stay in that vein for especially people that have kids.
I love that, and also love me some Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart Tolle, however you want to pronounce his name. Be
Mhm.
in the now.
Mhm.
But no, actually, you raise a really good point there too. And actually, yesterday I was speaking to a gentleman about the time dilation or time distortion and things like that, and he said that one of the things that he used to do was he would make every goal, but he'd set it out and he'd have a 10-year time. And like he just put it out there 10 years. Like by the time, 10 years has passed, this will have happened. And then he just adjusts it every day as he learns more and he gets closer to that goal. And he says that kind of motivates him. It's pretty unique. I mean, I hadn't heard of anyone doing that before. Have you ever heard of anything like that?
We do something different, but I'm curious, Chris, like, because you're around, probably more people are talking about this. Why don't you think people like we got New Year's coming up. So many people are doing like the resolutions. They're going to set their goals for the year. Quite frankly, I think most people forget about it till the next resolution there. Why? I mean, we all hear it all the time. Like, what's your theory? Like, I'm curious, why people don't check their goals or not review them as much as, we kind of tend to think we need to.
Well, really, Alex, it goes back to what you were saying earlier about having clarity and just doing what you actually want to do and what's going to benefit you. Because what happens a lot, and I made only one New Year's resolution, and I don't remember even when I made it, might be decades ago now, was to not make any New Year's resolutions. And it's just that because you get caught up in the euphoria, maybe a bit of peer pressure, and then you see, "Oh, I want to get in shape." Well, because that's just what everybody's saying. Well, I'm going to go to the gym more. Okay, why? Or I'm going to get out of debt, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. It's because you're hyped up on, I guess the word is hopium, and then you start actually doing it. Maybe you start actually doing it. Maybe you forget because you're hungover. But then you don't really have any accountability to yourself because a spur of the moment. Maybe you were thinking about it before, but 9 times out of 10 you weren't really thinking about it before. Because let's be honest. I mean, if you're not thinking about getting in shape for the entire year, one day out of the year at the end when you're, hyped up on champagne and, hot pockets or cheese balls or whatever you're doing, you're not going to be able to follow through with that, right?
I think you said, I mean, well, first off, you said Hot Pockets. So now we're best friends forever there. So I always think about, when I think of Hot Pockets, I think about like, if anybody's listening to this, I don't know, Chris, is something for you is like, like when you eat that Hot Pocket, I don't know how you microwave it to the point where it's either A, not scalding hot the first time you bite it and it just basically bursts in your mouth and you're just probably need to go to the ER, or it's still frozen inside. So I think, I don't know how the comments work, but anybody have the perfect minute temperature ratio? I would love to hear it because I know we give it to our kids all the time. But I do think you're right. I think there's a lot of this. We were talking about social media even before this, and so in my world, Instagram's kind of like our big social media platform. And I know people ask me all the time, they're like, Alex, like we have like 160, 170,000 people that are, following that platform. And they're like, you must be on social media all the time. And don't be wrong, there are definitely moments I am. There's no question about it. But honestly, it's like, it's a tool. It is a part of my business plan. It's not where I get my euphoria. And I think that's part of what's changed a lot, especially in procrastination, is there is so much virality with social media and all these different platforms that are basically hitting your dopamine and serotonin and adrenaline. And they're saying, you got to be this, you got to be that. I do think it makes it harder for people to kind of stay with goals. I 100% agree with you on that.
Yeah, and it's funny that we get back onto social media. Actually, just this morning, I was flipping through YouTube for the news, and Australia became I think, the first country to ban social media or to try to ban social media for anyone under the age of 16. I don't know how it's going to work out, but I know that again, I'm no role model in this because I've been known to doom scroll if I've had nothing else to do. You're sitting in line waiting for something, but we just need to be cognizant that we're giving this example to our children as well, that it's okay to pull out your phone, scroll mindlessly for hours on end.
Yeah, I mean, it's I mean, my kids are still a little too young for it, but I know my friends that have teenagers. I mean, you ask them what's the biggest problem right now in their house, and they say social media, games. Like, the addictiveness of each of these devices and each of these social media platforms. It's interesting. I'm curious, and I'm saying this just more of like a curiosity question is how Chat GPT and all the different AI pieces is going to change the social media as a collective there. Because I know that more and more what's happening, and at least I know from I always think entrepreneurs are kind of like, for better or worse, they kind of are starting things. They're fast starters. If there's something brand new, they're kind of like a year or 2 years ahead before medium-sized companies come in, and then the bigger companies come in and kind of do all the things. And I'm curious to see how it changes everything, because I also wonder if in some level there is this aspect of, because people think that everything's going to be through Chat GPT or AI and it's actually not real. I'm actually wondering if that actually hurts the social media, or if it actually goes in a whole different perspective, is we have no idea who anybody is at this point. So that's just off the procrastination train, but the thing on my mind a lot.
It's been in my mind as well because I'm connected really well with some pretty cool tech startups and the things that they can do right now. You know that right now they can take 300 pictures of my face and they can actually make me a Zoom model of myself where I can be giving, you can actually go and you can talk to me and it's not me. I mean, it's not perfect because, it doesn't always move right or whatever, but I mean, it's getting pretty scary what they can do.
It's amazing. And listen, I'm saying this as for any entrepreneur. I mean, I use ChatGPT all the time because I'm trying to train it to understand how I think, which maybe that's the worst thing to do, because eventually now there's going to be a chat GPT of myself. Because the reality is that, of course, as a business, right, you're thinking of this as like, we're talking about procrastination. It's like, hey, how do I save time? How do I save some myself so I can work on the bigger piece of the business? And so even just like a simple example is, I have a friend right now who's trying to train it to actually basically become the coach in the business. So, this idea that instead of having all these different extra coaches in his agency, he's going to train this chat GPT. So when people ask a question, it's like they're getting an answer directly from him, as opposed to him having to hire all these other coaches, etc. So I do think this is something that, I guess I'll say this. I think the biggest thing I worry about with it is the creativity of everything. I worry about that a lot. I think we all see it sometimes in movies right now, right? There really aren't many new movies. It's always like kind of the second version, or it's the versions they created in the 1990s is kind of rehashed. And I do hope that, at some level that like we still have that kind of intimacy with ourselves and our imagination and kind of coming up with it, which, I think is something that, especially with, we've been talking about kids a lot. It's something we're trying to make sure they do, and trying to make sure they're trying to cultivate. And of course, try to keep them off all the screens and everything that goes into it there. Because, as a kid, I remember running into the woods, right? That's what I did. My parents said, get out of the house and go in the woods all day there. So that's how I think the imagination creation. But I think that's the part that, from a excitement perspective, I see the benefits, and also obviously the other side of it. It's like, how do we find that balance?
Actually, one of the biggest think tanks in the world, I was actually lucky enough to be in on one of their sessions. And what they pointed out was there's like you said, there's always a duality, right? In the short term, they didn't really see it as being like a real hindrance or a real threat, because actually Sony's now got a patent out there, oops, leak, that they actually have a smart TV that's coming out that's going to have an AI in it. And they've already starting to pilot this with, I think it's Warner Brothers, and I think Netflix was trying it as well, to see what would happen if people would watch a totally AI generated show. None of the characters are real, none of the voice acting is real, and it was completely generated by user input. And the idea is to have it where, for a subscription service or whatever, you'll sit in front of your TV and you'll say, I want to watch a country western with a dinosaur riding donkey that has flying dragons or something. And it'll just generate that as it's going. And then it'll ask you, do you like this ending? And then you can rewrite it as you go. So, I mean, tools like that I could see not hindering our creativity at all, but they also caution that more and more of us are using it. And, I've been guilty of this too, using Chat GPT to write correspondence emails. Like, how can I say this in a diplomatic way? These are my bullet points. Write me an email that's perfect for this situation. And, I get that that's great. And then this think tank also was thinking on the same lines that eventually we could become sort of dependent on And so it's almost like when the power goes out at any major grocery store or anywhere, the cashiers really can't make change or they can't really do anything because the system's down. So what happens if we're relying on these? I can feel it now. We're integrated and we've got these interpreters or something that always they talk for us. And then the interpreters go down. Now, how do we interact?
Yeah. It reminds me of that Disney movie. I don't know why I can't think of it there.
Wally?
Thank you. I was literally reading minds now at this point there. But I mean, it reminds me of that, right? It doesn't remind me of this point. But I'll say this too, and maybe this is just the part of me that also is like listening for those people that continue to, work on themselves. I think that's why personal growth. I mean, this idea maybe, and I'll kind of take it full spin. There definitely is part of procrastination. I mean, one thing that happens, it's so interesting. How often, not a lot. I'm just saying like there's like a day where the internet shuts down, right? Or Verizon has a malfunction. And what's interesting is everybody stops working. Like everybody stops working. And I think it says a lot that's like, why? Like I mean, there's some businesses, I get it. They can't take phone calls. Doesn't mean they don't have other things they can't do during the day. But a lot of times these businesses shut down. There was literally, it's not that long ago. I lived just south of Pittsburgh. And so there was like a storm and it basically kind of knocked the electricity out of a bunch of businesses in the area. And, of course, there was some things like, hey, we can't do cash registers, which is totally fine. But a lot of the businesses sent their workers home the rest of the day, even though they were told like, well, the electricity will come back up. It's just interesting that there's a lot of things that basically kind of have that shutdown piece. And I do wonder if we just simply say, if I don't have access to this, I can't do it. And just a funny kind of side note, it reminds me of my friend who goes to the gym and he can't go to the gym because he can't find his Bluetooth headphones. So he doesn't have music that he's listening to. Well, he can't go to the gym because he needs his music. So it holds him back. So I think it does kind of hopefully give people this idea that like, maybe we need to be a little less reliant on it just so we can still get things done.
No, I agree with that a lot. I think sometimes it comes down to comfort too, right? We are creatures of comfort. So if we get used to something, whether that something is good or bad, I won't use good or bad, but let's say it's beneficial or not beneficial, then, like your friend with the Bluetooth headset. I mean, that's technically not a blocker or deal breaker for a lot of people. But, he would have to know himself to see why that's why that is such a deal breaker for him. Because, I've known people that, they absolutely have to have music when they're working, or they absolutely have to be like, they could be talking like we are right now, Alex, and they'd be scribbling on a notepad, and they absolutely have to do that. This is especially true with both individuals who, are ADHD. They need that extra stimulus to kind of keep their mind sort of focused. But in normal cases, I mean, we look at it more as like a thing of comfort, a thing of almost habit, if you will, right?
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest misconception about procrastination? Because I know that, we've talked a lot about it, but I'm kind of curious when we talk about technology and stuff, but, you're around it way more than I am. Like, what do you see as like the biggest either mistruth, misconception about procrastination that quite frankly gets a lot of publicity?
Oh, yeah. So that gets a lot of publicity. The first thing that comes to there's a couple of things that come to mind. The first thing that comes to mind is that, you're lazy or you're broken in some way. I mean, you're not lazy. You may be uninterested, but that doesn't make you lazy. And it's funny how a lot of people come in and they say, "Oh, this guy's so lazy because he never gets it done." No, he's just not interested in it's just not important to him. It's not interesting to him, you know? And the other misconception I get from procrastination, and interestingly enough, it starts out as a joke. They say, "Procrastination coach, you can teach me how to procrastinate better." Like, yeah, I can. So procrastination doesn't have to be a bad thing. There are certain instances where it is more beneficial to work with it than work against it. One of the examples I have actually was speaking to an Italian programmer, and he he actually works with it in that because he tried various things. He just said, you know what, I'm just gonna give up and I'm just gonna go back in because he doesn't want to figure out exactly what the root is of it. So he says, I'll just work with it. And so he would actually, every time he gets a deadline, he'll push it ahead by 3 weeks. He'll put it in his calendar 3 weeks before. And then he knows that that gives him about enough time to kick in the old crisis maker mode and actually get it done.
It reminds me because I think that I feel the same way. I think there's a lot of people think like, oh, if you're procrastinating, you're lazy. Like you're just simply lazy. It reminds me, and I was listening to a podcast, and it was for just everyone's sake. I basically listen to business podcasts. I listen to basically comedies. So it probably was one of these business podcasts. But I heard somebody say something I thought was really interesting, kind of talking about this idea of being lazy, right? This concept of like, oh, you're lazy. What does that mean? Does that mean you're just not doing anything? And the person on the other side said, like, you know what, actually, you have to be careful of the person in business. Like the person you have to worry about the most is the person who actually is really lazy, but also wants to either get rich or wants something change. Because that person will more often than not try to work. They're not going to try to do anything more difficult. If anything, they're going to try to make everything as easy as possible. And it's kind of the opposite of what I think most of us think when we think of people that aren't procrastinating. Well, if you aren't procrastinating, you must be working hard. You must be going fast. You must be like going you're clearly a better, quote unquote, more productive human being than the other person. But his theory is that, you know what? It's actually backwards. It's almost like the person who doesn't procrastinate has this like kind of like red badge of courage that says, you know what, I work hard. That's me. I'm working hard. That's why we can hear these people hustle, grind, hustle, grind, hustle, grind. They scream it on social media as if that's the best thing in the world. But he also says, like, you know what? Look at the person that's very simply trying to find the most efficient way to do something. The people we hear all the time, the entrepreneur that says, I'm only working 2 hours a day and I'm making really good money. And the person who's not procrastinating, working hard says, oh, they're so lazy. They're so lazy. They're so lazy. But maybe that's the point. The point is that we're not trying to have us all stop procrastinating. The whole maybe point is that maybe they're just simply trying to find a better way of doing something there. And I think that part is a unique piece that I know that a lot of my clients work with on the entrepreneur side. It's like, well, why aren't you building your business? You're just trying to find a better way of doing things than the other. So maybe you need to give yourself that permission to say, I'm not a procrastinator. Give yourself a way of saying, I'm more efficient. Give yourself a different identity, a different label, so that you don't own this piece that basically maybe the world wants you to own, and quite frankly, just isn't true.
No, I definitely agree with that for sure because again, you're not lazy. It's funny because I've been there literally for a 2-hour task. I literally spent, I think it was 10 hours researching maybe a way that I could make that task shorter. So it sometimes goes the opposite way too. And you kind of have to be careful with that sometimes too, and just be like, okay, if it's going to take me 2 hours to do this task and I want to do it better, I'm going to take maybe 4 hours to figure it out. And if not, I'll just do it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I say this because I love my dad. My dad, we grew up on a farm. So have that farmer's mentality. You get up early, you do whatever you need with the animals, the garden, the plants, all the stuff, and you work till whenever the work's done. You call it a night. And it's just and this is something as an entrepreneur. So my family had this legacy of basically building either self-employed jobs or just trying these entrepreneurial pieces and just never kind of figuring out how to make it work. So there was a part of, I know for me, from a mindset and mission perspective, like I turned 30 and I said, I know I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. No idea what that meant. I didn't know what job, I didn't know what career, I didn't know what company, but I said, I'm just going to go all in because I want to change that part of the family legacy. And for many, many years, I just kept failing for like 3 or 4 years. Like tried this, tried that, tried all these types of things. And what was interesting is that I noticed something that happened. I noticed that I'd start getting this path of like success. And my path said, I got to keep doing more. I got to work harder. I got to figure it out. I think we all hear that. I got to figure it out. I got to figure out. I got to figure out. And then all of a sudden that business didn't work, or I basically hit a burnout point or whatever it looked like. So was I procrastinating? No, I probably was either burnt out or I just could not figure it out at that point there. So naturally, I think we all go from this psychology place, like I'm not going to keep doing something that I'm sucking at or I'm not doing good in. So what kind of came in my brain is like, oh my gosh, like one of the reasons I think that at least for my family side, we couldn't get through this entrepreneur side is that we simply felt like we had to be involved in everything. every task, every decision, every activity, and to the point, or we were trying to make every activity perfect. Well, if somebody did this, it better be perfect. Let me go back. Let me review. So one of the things I know that it took me years and years and years to, and probably still to this day, is just not expecting this idea of perfection and just simply giving it to somebody. Here's the outcome. You figure it out. Now, don't get me wrong, it made me hire some bad people, but it's also helped me hire people that I think actually want to take ownership, want to take responsibility, want to take it better. But I think that's part of this idea of procrastination is that, hey, you don't have to figure everything out. If it's working out, great. Do you need to figure out every single workout program, or can you just find somebody who's built something that you can use? Hey, do you need to be cleaning your house the whole time, or can you find somebody to help you kind of take care of some of the house chores? I think part of this is just I don't think time's the issue. I think energy is part of the issue when we kind of stop.
No, I'm glad that you hit on energy because, that's one of the biggest things, actually one of the biggest misconceptions of procrastination too, is that, if I fill up my calendar, I'm definitely going to get it done and I'm definitely going to do it. Funny enough, there are all these different apps. There's Ducks in a Row, there's Motion, there's everything that'll help put your tasks in order and prioritize them. But I had somebody come to me and they said, I just can't seem to do it. And I love how you brought up energy just there now because, they put some of their most emotionally draining tasks right after they get up in the morning. Like, why would you do that to yourself? It's like you're going outside and you're, instead of taking in sunshine, you're jumping in this like ice cold bucket of ice, or I completely messed that up, but you get where I'm going with it.
Yeah. So one of my friends, she's a practitioner of, if anybody's heard, it's called the Colby Index. It's very similar to a lot of it's not a personality test because I know my friend Emily would basically shoot me if I said that, but it's basically a very similar assessment of kind of how you operate. And one of Emily's quotes, and I know she said she heard this from the founder, was that when nothing is working, do nothing. And I think that's sometimes the most interesting, like when you hear that, like, no, I gotta go do something. But every time I know that I'm just hitting my head in the wall, I just literally stop. It's one of the reasons why, like, today, this is my only thing with you, Chris. This is all I got today. And after this, I'm going to go back, got to go cut down Christmas trees and do all the rest of the pieces there. I know the other thing that we do as a business is that we shut the business down December 23rd all the way till January 2nd, like for myself, for my team, and that's not taking in their vacation. They have extra vacation, extra time off that they want to do. I do think this part of energy, I think, is such an important piece that for a lot of us, I know for me specifically, we hear this idea it's a marathon. So then what that means for people is, oh, I got to work from 8 to 4, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, take the weekends off. I don't think everybody works that way. I think everybody's got to find what their energy thing is. So for me, I'm very much up. I go 2-3 weeks hard, shut it down for a week. 2 or 3 weeks hard, shut it down. Sometimes it's 6 weeks, shut it down for 2 weeks. So I think finding this, like your own energy balance, is crucial, especially to this idea of like, if you're really procrastinating, maybe you just don't have the capacity to do anything else at that point. Your body's saying, stop, just stop.
I love that, and I'm going to steal it. I'm going to, if nothing is working, do nothing. I like that. The one that I tended to use and fall back on is, we are human beings. We're not human doings. So, I mean, if you're not doing, just be.
I've never heard that one. That's a good one. I might steal that one as well, too. I'm curious, Chris, like who's typically listening? Is it, you have an entrepreneur community? Is it just generally people? Like, is it employees? Like who's listening?
Well, we have a pretty decent mix. About 10% of them take the title literally, so they just come and hang out. They're just here for whatever.
Yeah.
And then we do have a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of dreamers that they like to hear these stories. They like to hear practical tips. They like to hear strategies. They like to hear the motivation because although it has gotten better. I mean, traditionally, when you've gone to social media and you hear all these people that say, oh, they're parked in front of those big houses and got those nice cars, you don't see the fact that they tried to start, 10 businesses before and they failed, or, that they have challenges, everything's all rosy and there. So, just being able to talk to somebody like yourself and hearing that, yeah, there are challenges, that they can be overcome. But yeah, I mean, you're not going to sit there and become an overnight success. Your overnight success takes, sometimes 5-10 years.
Yeah. It's so funny you said that because I think this is actually a really cool thing. And the reason why I was saying this is so November for me is kind of big picture. It's time of year to really just think about everything personally, my family, business, life. I just kind of slow down. If you even go on my Instagram, I'm not posting a lot. I'm not doing my stories. I'm not kind of following that rhythm. Our team's kind of like maintaining everything. And I don't know if it's not planned. It just seems to happen every year. So I don't have like, okay, on my calendar, this is the time I'm going to think big picture. It just kind of seems to happen. And I think this is something I find that I think is really cool what you've done with the podcast here, just simply anybody who's kind of building our community, is that I have this theory that communities aren't built actually on goals. They're built on problems. They're built on this idea that I've been trying to find a place where I fit in and I can't. And that is a problem. And the most interesting thing about when you find a community like that, right? When you actually find your community, and there's so many of them, right? All like, I know some of us might bash it here, but there's this CrossFit community, right? There's this community of CrossFitters that are shirts off, trying to, do exercises that might quite frankly injure them. And there's this institution and group that says, oh, you can't do that. That's awful for your body. That's awful for your energy systems. And they don't care because they don't fit into Planet Fitness. They don't fit into LA. They found a community, whether it's right or wrong, they found a community. And I think that's this part of this idea of this community, this idea, like even when we're talking about procrastination, it's that there's actually nothing wrong with you. I think we don't give ourselves enough credit for that. I know, for example, my company is called Born to Lead. Why? Because I know there's a lot of people that are in this world, especially this entrepreneurial world, that are told to build funnels, do marketing this way, do sales that way. Like they don't talk about leadership. And this person's like, I like leading people. I like to work with people. I feel like they almost are willing to sacrifice themselves in the name of the good. And so that's why I kind of built this community. It's like, listen, you're great as a leader. Like there's nothing wrong with you. Just because you don't have the perfect marketing or sales background doesn't mean you can't create this incredible brand and this incredible business. But I hope that everyone's kind of listening to this. And at least for me too, it's like, hey, listen, like if you're procrastinating, just maybe give yourself a break. Just one moment. Just say, maybe there's not anything wrong with me. It's just where I am right now. What happens? I know for me, when I'm beating the living crap out of myself, I feel like crap. I eat horrible. I do less. I sleep more. I feel like I can't get going there. But I think you've done something great here, Chris, is give place a saying like, hey, you're okay just the way you are. Like you'll figure it out.
No, and that's it. That's exactly right. Again, my premise is that you're not broken. You're not lazy. You don't really need to be fixed. Just as like a quick aside here, a lot of procrastination is it's programming, like anything else, right? And programming can be changed. Whether it's because of its habits from younger years or whether it's something new. You're just operating based on the best set of parameters or the best information you have right now. That information is incomplete or wrong, it can be changed, and then you can adjust the narrative.
Yeah. And I think sometimes you just say, I think all of us, the funniest thing is that, being the former swimming coach, it kind of reminds me of, I talk with a lot of our clients, right? We have this, we started with this exercise and we start with this exercise. Actually, you kind of talked about, we call it kind of your success DNA exercise. And we talk about this exercise because we say, really, if you think about building a brand or building a business, it's two factors. It's number one, it's focus. And number two, it's energy. When you have focus energy, basically anything happens. And so what we do is this exercise. It doesn't matter how successful they are coming in. It doesn't matter if they haven't done anything. We go through this exercise and we try to find where is your highest of energy? Like where is the things that really bring excitement, fire, passion, compassion, joy, even if it feels like all over the place, right? Like where is that energy coming from? And for us, we find it with very two simple questions. Number one, what are you good at? Are you good at speaking? Are you good at writing? Like what do you really love to talk about? Like what can you talk about a lot? And you get really extremely passionate about it. And then the second is belief. What do you think is simply right? Even if everybody else, one of my favorite quotes is that what's popular is not always right, but what's right is not always popular. And what I mean by that is that if you think something's right, it may not be popular, but you believe it's right. So what is that belief system? And we find that very simply, wow, that creates this buzz of energy. Like, and obviously too much energy without focus, you're going back and forth with no basically direction. But we start there. And then on the other side, with focus, especially with our people, we say, great, let's talk about this. First off, what are your advantages? Do you have a network that you already are tapped in? Do you have a very specific genre way of working with people? Do you have a very specific skill sets that make it easier for you to do it? So a lot of our leaders, as an example, they're like, well, I'm not good marketing. I'm not good sales. I'm not good at this. I'm not good at systems. I'm not good at this. I'm like, yes, but what are you good at? What are you great at? I'm a pretty good leader. People like to listen to me. Great. Leads follow leaders. So go be a leader and talk to your leads like a leader, and you might start seeing it different. Oh, so I think it's these types of pieces there that kind of keep going into it, and this, constant reaffirmation. So, you're probably doing the same thing with your clients, I'm guessing, Chris. It's like, hey, if you're procrastinating, it's not like there's a one size fits all every single time. There's just some different pieces of where you're coming from. I'm sure that's a lot of your advice when you talk with your clients and people on the podcast.
But yeah, no, for sure. It's all about knowing first and foremost, knowing yourself, right? If you don't know yourself, you're lost. And it doesn't mean that you have to have it all figured out today. I mean, I learned something about myself literally, I think it was like a month ago that I never really figured out. It took me like 37 years to figure it out. But just never stop being curious, even about yourself, and
What'd you
know
find out?
yourself. Yeah.
Now I know. What'd you find out?
Well, actually, it was related to my own set of sort of avoiding like water sports and stuff, right? So digging into that, I always understood I don't like water sports. I don't like water activities because I almost drowned when I was a kid in a swimming lesson environment. And it never really occurred to me that, that incident also shaped my, kind of my rescuer syndrome and kind of my inability to ask for help. I kind of, at that point, I was about 5 or 6. And I just said, well, screw this. I'm just going to do it myself. You're going to let me die? I'm going to do it myself. I'm not asking you for help. So I didn't even really tie it to that.
See, you could have been we could have been swimming buddies, it sounds like, at that point. I think that's fun. It's funny you said that there. Because I know I had a friend of mine, biggest introvert, or as he would describe himself, shyest person. I remember I met him back in 2014. And the first time I met him, he was this guy that when he would go to any networking event. So by the way, just so everyone knows, I can talk 24 hours a day. And basically my wife needs breaks from me because she needs her quiet space. So I need to go and basically hang out with the kids or go talk to somebody. But at the time in 2014, he said, oh, I'm very shy. I don't like talking, to the point where he'd go to these networking events and he'd get into a cold sweat because he was so nervous going in front of other people and just trying to interact with people he didn't know. Long story short, he was one of my best men at one of my weddings there. But long story short, like a couple of years later, he always listened to comedians. He always listened to, I don't know who his favorite comedians are, but he basically was listening to podcasts or watching YouTube shows or whatever. And so one day he gave himself, he's like, maybe I want to try to, do this. I want to try to be a comedian. So he joined an improv class, and he joined this improv class. It was so good. Like, he was so funny. Like, just naturally, he would get on stage and somebody would give him a topic, or somebody would say something. He knew exactly what to say back. And it was almost like kind of giving himself this new place of like being somebody different than what he saw himself originally was. I think you're right. I think there's a lot of things as kids, we kind of shape ourselves as, well, this is who I am. This is how I am. This is what I'm supposed to be. And maybe it's not.
No, I definitely love that. Actually, just going into that as well, we are coming up pretty close to the time. This has been an awesome conversation. Do you think that there's anything, Alex, that, I could have asked or should have asked, but I didn't ask, or anything that we should have covered that we really didn't cover today?
I do think that, we kind of we're kind of touching on to it. I think this identity piece is actually a big piece of this whole, I mean, when we think about procrastination, I'm not a Buddhist or anything like that, but in Buddhism culture, I'm only kind of giving it in layman's terms. So if you do practice, please don't shoot the messenger here. But I heard this theory that we actually go through these depths every 7 years as we're living, that who we are today is literally not who we're going to be 7 years from now. But we too often hold on to all the different ideas. And that's why we do have all these different psychological issues and these turmoils, because we're not embracing this next level of person who we become. I think it's natural to think about it from a school perspective, but I think after we graduate from school, I don't think we do that as enough. I think that's part of something that's a way deeper conversation, but I do think this idea of identity and who you are today, maybe that's not who you are anymore. And maybe that's the part where you do actually have to say, well, who actually I really am, just like the friend who was an introvert and now doing improv comedy shows.
No, it's a really good note to end on. And interestingly enough, it's not only that; it's about every 7 years. It's about how long it takes all the cells in your body to die and be replaced. So you're literally another person. And
Mhm.
that goes into a whole other huge, philosophical discussion. Like, well, then who am I? And then they use these funny examples like that. I don't know. I don't remember the name of the boat. They're gonna shoot me now. The boat where they replace one plank at a time until it's all been replaced. Well, it's the same boat.
Yeah, very much there.
Anyway, Alex, it's been great having you in the show. Thank you so much for your time. A lot of great insights, a lot of great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I know our listeners did too. What is the best way for our listeners to reach out and get in touch with
Yeah, I tell people this is that I try to be the ethos of our business, which is that I think leaders lead, which means that the best way to do it is that you will either talk with me or Marissa or Erica on our team. But the best way to do it is go to Instagram. So you can either literally go to Instagram if you type in my name, Alex Kuhn, Kuhn. Usually, if you type in Alex, I'm one of the first people that pops up there. Follow me and I will actually personally reach out to you there. It's not one of those bots that you'll get something from me. It will literally be a voicemail, it will be a video message. I think there's just something to be said for that. None of us are too, if we're really trying to build a community, I think there's always time to say hello to people that actually spend time in your world. So if you end up doing come to my world at all, please know I'm grateful, whether you ever spend $1 with me or not, because I do want to make sure that at the end of the day, I have a very, very specific mission. I want to make sure people first leaders actually succeed in business. So that's you, that resonates with you. Go to Instagram, Alex Kuhn, Kuhn, follow. You'll hear from me personally.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Alex. And as always, don't worry about grabbing a pen and paper and trying to figure that out. We will have it in the show notes for you. And thank you once again for tuning in. And just remember, if you can't find that motivation or inspiration for yourself today, maybe just try and go out and be that inspiration or motivation for someone else. And we'll see you again next time.